Hello, welcome to Spread Book Joy. Today I want to talk to you about autumnal reads. If you're new to the channel, I'm Jack, and if you're not, you welcome back. And I'm just going to talk about seasonal reading for a little bit of this video just to start with, because it's something that I didn't do on BookTube, or at least I don't think I did, though I was always drawn to reading more sort of gothic kind of literature in the winter and autumn months. But since starting BookTube, I've really enjoyed and embraced this idea of reading seasonally. I love the change of seasons. Summer is my favourite season for many reasons. One being it's my birthday in the summer, but two, I've got so many positive associations and great memories from the summer that it is always going to be my favourite. However, I love all of the other seasons. I couldn't live in an eternal summer. It wouldn't sit right with me, because I just love this change of seasons. I love the fact that we have four very distinct seasons in the UK, and I just love watching the change of the landscape. Now that we're in the countryside, it's even more exciting. So this is our first full year in the countryside, and we're just watching things change. So what I've done for this video is I've got some footage of Dartmoor and local wood walks that we did where we're looking for signs of autumn, and so I'm going to intersperse me talking about autumnal books with some of that footage for you. Do you read seasonally? And if so, what do you like about it? I think for me, it's the fact that embracing a new season usually means embracing a lot of different things, different food, different clothing. There's a definite change in the weather, so you kind of have to embrace it really. Otherwise, I think a lot of people get quite depressed when the summer's finished and we start getting this more gloomy, rainy kind of weather. I don't mind it. It doesn't bother me. Darkness kind of bothers me, but this is why we have such amazing sort of midwinter festivals and things and celebrations, and why you have to think about all the cozy food and the nice kind of autumnal aesthetic that goes along with it, all the, you know, the warm cozy scarves and jumpers and things like that, and hot drinks, and yeah, I just love all of that. So you have to kind of, all of the things that could be seen as a negative, they also bring lots of positives with them. And so reading as well. Reading is something that I love no matter what time of year it is. I love to read outside in the summer, and I equally love to read indoors, wrapped up nice and cozy, especially if it's like, you know, stormy outside or raining in any way and you can hear the rain on the window. I just love it. Now that I've been on BookTube for a while, I kind of have embraced this idea of seasonal reading. For me, autumn and winter are kind of similar in the kind of books, the vibe that I want to get from my books. So there's two very distinct kind of categories here. They're distinct in some ways, but they have crossover. So I'm going to talk to you about not necessarily books that are set in the autumn. These are books that I want to read in the autumn because the feelings that they evoke in me. One category for me is definitely cozy. Like, autumn is cozy, isn't it? It's, you know, warm drinks, scarves, blankets, roaring fires starting to be lit once the weather gets really chilly, and yeah, I love that cozy aspect of autumn. So we're going to have some cozy books that evoke a cosy feeling. They might have some autumnal aesthetic about them, which is very sweet, but they don't have to. They just have to have that just warmth about them. Then the other category, of course, we're entering the dark half of the year here in the Northern Hemisphere. So definitely for me, spooky, gothic, mysterious. So I'm always craving kind of mysteries and gothic writing. I'm not going to include any Victorian literature in this video because it's Victober at the moment. I always associate Victorian literature with October now since being on BookTube, because it's this readathon, if you're not familiar with it, where we read and celebrate and read Victorian literature. I'll link the hosts announcement videos in the description box below if you're interested in it. It's still going on now. So yeah, I associate that. So I'm not going to talk about Victorian literature in this video, though I do have that is autumn for me, reading Victorian literature. But because I've got other videos coming out with Victorian literature, and I'm not going to mention any Victorian books in this. But the other part of it for me, like I said, is gothic, mystery, and that spooky thing. Not horror, like not modern horror where there's any sort of gore or anything like that, but definitely that old-fashioned kind of gothic, mystery, spooky vibe. That's the sort of distinct two categories, cozy and gothic. So I'm going to give you my recommendations for those categories. I say recommendations, they're books that I love and I associate with these categories. You may not think they're autumn reads. That's fine. If you don't, that's fine, not a problem. But for me, this is my autumnal reading selection. I'm also going to give you some, show you some books off of my TBR, my to be read list, where I've got some books that I want to read that I think will be perfect for this season as well. The tiny hamlet of Postbridge is famous for having two wonderful bridges over the East Dart, which is a tributary of the River Dart, and one bridge, the one we're coming up to, dates from 1780, but just beside it is the Postbridge, the old Clapper Bridge, which dates from the 13th century, and you can still walk over it today. As we just purchased an action cam, we're also giving you a treat of some footage from under the river. Postbridge is also famous for the legend of the hairy hands. These are spectral hands that have been known to appear as drivers are crossing the bridge, grab the wheel and steer them off the road to crash. So first of all, let's talk Cosy, shall we? Cosy for me, I'm going to start off with a book that I don't actually have a physical copy of, but I read last year and made me fall in love with Cosy fantasy, and that is Booktube Darling, Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. You're probably sick of seeing this book, but if you are into the idea of cozy, like food descriptions, found family, and just an all-round general lovely feeling book, Legends and Lattes is for you. It is about an orc who decides to hang up her mercenary sword because she's been, treasure hunting and monster hunting with a marauding band for years. She's decided to retire and open up a coffee shop, and she does that in this kind of, this typical kind of fantasy, medieval, like high fantasy town. It's just lovely and heartwarming, and what more could you want in the autumn? Continuing on with cozy kind of almost fantasy feel, I've got Garlic and the Vampire. This is a really cozy, cute little graphic novel all about this character Garlic, who was brought to life by a witch, and her and some other vegetables work in the witch's garden, and then a vampire moves in next door, and all the other creatures are like to this really nervous character Garlic, you're going to have to hunt the vampire because you're Garlic, so you're obviously the obvious choice. So poor old Garlic has to go off and confront this vampire, but it's just so cute. It's very, very sweet, and if you like cozy and sweet and that's what you want for autumn, then I highly recommend this. My favourite middle grade book from last year, October. Now, how autumnal can you get? Look at this beautiful cover by Angela Harding, who is an artist and illustrator that I love. So October is a gorgeous book with amazing descriptions of nature and animals. So October lives in the woods with her father. She's lived there her whole life, and she's brought up there, and they live in the woods and they're wild, and that's this theme. Then October's father has an accident and she has to go and live with her estranged mother who lives in a city, and so we see this sort of contrast between the two halves of October's life, and it's just beautifully written and just mesmerising book. I loved it, absolutely loved it, and I can't recommend it more, especially in October. I can't recommend cozy reads and not recommend a Discworld book, because those are cozy reads for me. They are comfort reads for me, and if I want comfort and I want cozy, then go for Discworld. And when I think of the autumn, this is what I think of. I think of Reaper Man. So check this out. There's Death. I'm not going to go into too much about it, but if you've never heard of the Discworld, I do have a video on where to start with Terry Pratchett's Discworld. It is a huge 41 book series, and a lot of people never know where to start with it, so you might want to check out my video on that. I'll put it in the description box. But in this, the second book in the Death sequence, Death is basically working on a farm. I'm not going to talk about why he ends up there because it might give you a few spoilers, but he ends up working on this farm at harvest time. One of the things that really makes me laugh is when they ask him whether he can use a scythe, if he has experience using a scythe. The people don't recognise him as Death. They think he's just this guy called, I think he's called Bill Dorr. That's his name. He comes up with a really bad name. And yeah, so it's just gorgeous, but I love this Josh Kirby cover. I know a lot of people don't like the Josh Kirby covers. I absolutely adore them. They're my favourite covers of all time, really, because when I was a kid I was absolutely mesmerised by them, and I've always loved them. But yeah, look, it's very autumnal, as autumnal as you can get, really. And I'm going to recommend a picture book. This is the ultimate autumnal picture book. This is Pumpkin Soup by Helen Cooper, and I might do some top-down footage so you can just see how beautiful it is. We've got these three lovely characters. This is one of my favourite books to read with children, and it's all about these three friends. We have a cat and a duck and a squirrel, and they live in an old white cabin in the woods, and every day what they do is they play their instruments and they make pumpkin soup, and they live in the woods and they're friends, and then one day they have a huge squabble. It's a wonderful book about friendship, about looking after each other, about forgiveness, and pumpkin soup. Always makes me want to crave pumpkin soup, which I did have this week, funny enough. So yeah, very autumnal, and you can see, if I've shown you some top-down footage, you can see just how beautiful the illustrations in this book are. I just like, it gives me all the warm, cozy autumn vibes. Sticking with picture books and cozy picture books, you could say it's spooky, but it's really not. How cute is this? This is Ollie's Lost Kitten, and again, I'm going to do some top-down filming so you can see the beautiful illustrations. And this is beautiful. This little girl finds a lost kitten, and she decides to try and find out where the kitten has come from. And when we take the kitten off into the woods, we discover that it might actually belong to a witch, but not an unfriendly witch. Just again, really cute. Love the autumnal aesthetic to this, and I've read this with children at this time of year and they absolutely adore it. So that was Cosy. Moving on to a little bit spooky, but starting with a children's picture book, but a very recent one. It's The Skull by John Clausen, who is the amazing Canadian illustrator and author. I absolutely love this author. It looks like Clausen. I've heard it pronounced Clausen, so that's how I'm pronouncing it. And this is his most recent book. I'm going to do a video on this individually, but it's based on a Tyrolean folktale, and this girl is running away from home and she comes across an empty house, and the only thing in the house is this talking skull. And so the skull allows her to stay in the house and brings her in, and then they go to bed at night, and this skull says, oh, hang on, by the way, because they get on really well, the skull and the girl. By the way, there's this thing that comes at night. It's really, really frightening. And I don't know what to do about it, but every night this headless skeleton comes in and it's always looking for something and I have to get away from it. So that's the sort of premise of the story. It's really humorous. And if you're familiar with Clausen's illustration style, it's kind of this stark, very stark kind of almost monochrome but not quite illustration style, and he always manages to give his characters these really emotive expressions on their faces, even though they don't seem to have much of an expression, but their eyes kind of say everything. So the character of Attila, who is the girl, is just really fabulous in this and very clever, and she manages to solve the problem a little bit. But he said that he read this in a library when he was going to do a talk, and he saw this like folktales thing on a collection, and he read this story, The Skull, and it's different from how he remembers it, because he went home and he wrote this story, but he wrote it differently from the actual story. And when he read the story again, he was like, that's not how I remember it. So he's written this is the version that he remembered, but remembered wrongly. But it's a really good story anyway. Very, very funny, very humorous. I like it a lot. Sticking with children's books, I'm going to recommend Neil Gaiman's The Graveyard Book. This is Neil Gaiman's homage to the Jungle Book by Rudyard Kipling, which he was obsessed with when he was younger. And he, like, instead of setting a book which is about a boy raised by wolves in the jungle, you've got a boy being raised by ghosts in a graveyard. And it's kind of almost a loose collection of stories that are strung together with one common thread through them. So a lot of people read this and are like, well, actually, there's not this kind of, it's not satisfying. Sometimes Neil Gaiman's books aren't narratively satisfying, but his writing is so good and his ideas are so good and the characters are excellent. And it's a great book for this time of year, for adults or kids. And I really love the opening of this book. So maybe I'll read a little bit of it to you. Oh, and this edition I've got is illustrated by Chris Riddell, who I absolutely love. So I'm just going to show you. There is the first bit when you open it up. There he is. The man Jack paused on the landing. So the opening starts quite brutally, actually. There was a hand in the darkness and it held a knife. The knife had a handle of polished black bone and a blade finer and sharper than any razor. If it sliced you, you might not even know that you'd been cut, not immediately. The knife had done almost everything it was brought to that house to do, and both the blade and the handle were wet. A classic spooky tale for the autumn, and that is Ray Bradbury's Something Wicked This Way Comes. I finally read this for the first time a couple of years ago, and I loved Ray Bradbury's writing. And the very start of the book, in October, this carnival blows into town and these two young boys go to investigate, and they see that the carnival, the people who work in the carnival and own the carnival, are not all that they seem. And it's very atmospheric, very spooky, quite frightening actually, but yeah, really excellent book and perfect for this time of year. Back to children's books again, a lot of children's books in this, but I just love these particular books for the autumn. And this one of my favourite children's books of all time, and it is The Haunting of Aveline Jones. And you can see kind of why I've picked it for autumn, but it is again another classic ghost story. Aveline Jones has to go and visit her aunt. I think her aunt is in Cornwall actually, so she goes to this seaside town where her aunt lives, and it's like seaside in the winter, and it's kind of deserted, and she borrows a book from a local bookshop, and within the book certain things have been scratched out, and it's a book of ghost stories. And then she finds herself at the heart of a mysterious kind of ghost story or ghostly happenings, and she has to investigate, and it's just wonderful. It's perfect for this time of year. I couldn't recommend it enough, and I just loved reading this. The first time I read this was in the autumn, and I'd get up early in the morning before I started school when I was working as a teacher, and I would get up and drink my coffee, and it'd be like, I remember it being really rainy and windy outside and reading this, and it was just perfect. Now, I'm not going to mention any Victorian literature. I've already said I wouldn't because it is Victober and I've got some other book videos coming out and I don't want to just overwhelm you with Victorian literature recommendations. However, if you do like Victorian literature, or if you don't know if you do but you'd like to read something like that, then I recommend for this very good season, we've got something spooky and gothic and mysterious, and that is The Secrets of Hartwood Hall by Katie Lumsden, who has her own channel over here on BookTube called Books and Things. She is a Victorian literature enthusiast and wonderful author, and she also is a host of Victober. So Katie has sprinkled this book throughout with constant references to her favourite Victorian books, particularly Jane Eyre and The Tenant of Wildfell Hall that spring to mind when I read this. The opening of the book is, this governess on her way to the mysterious Hartwood Hall and the family that live there, who the locals say are cursed, and there are a lot of secrets to be uncovered, and it's just gothic and atmospheric and absolutely wonderful. Here are some books that are on my to be read shelf that I haven't read yet, but I think would go perfectly for this season if I can get around to them. So this season or the winter, because autumn winter books kind of get the same vibes. I want cozy and I want mysterious and gothic and dark, but possibly cozy and a bit mysterious. Wildwood by Colin Malloy with illustrations by Carson Ellis. Shelley over at Shelley Swearingen did a video on Carson Ellis, the illustrator, and I saw this book mentioned on there. I've not read it, and then the next day or two I was in a secondhand bookshop and I found it, so I picked this up, and this is all about Prue McKeel, whose baby brother is abducted by crows and hauled off to the woods beyond the city, and she has to bring him back. And the opening is very autumnal, so you can see them all dressed up there in their cozy outfits, and anything that's set in the woods in autumn, yeah, it's got to be right, got to be good, right? Especially the fact that they've been baby's been stolen by crows, because I love corvids, I love crows and ravens and rooks and jackdaws. So yeah, very excited about this. One I've had on my shelves for years, and because of the size of it, I haven't tackled it yet, but it is Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke, and it's, Victorian, mysterious, alternate history, and magic. So yeah, I'd really like to get to this at some point, but I think this strikes really good autumn vibes for me. Shirley Jackson, The Haunting of Hill House. I've got a Shirley Jackson book on the list for our FOMO Book Club next year. FOMO Book Club is the book club I run with Alice from Alice and the Giant Bookshelf and Gemma from Gem of Books, and we select 6 books every year that we read, one every 2 months, very casual, and we've got a Shirley Jackson, I think We Have Always Lived in the Castle, for next year. I've had The Haunting of Hill House on my shelves for some time, and it is a horror ghost story classic, so I really want to get to this. I actually do really want to get to this. This is what I'm prioritising for this season, and one I keep picking up every autumn because it looks so autumnal and I never get to read it. Again, it's a very thick book, but this is Duncton Wood by William Horwood. Look at this autumnal cover, isn't it beautiful? So it's all about moles that live in Duncton Wood. It's basically kind of like Watership Down but with moles, is from what I've heard of it. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to at some point in my life picking this book up. I had to share it with you because look at all the autumn. Beautiful. So those are my recommended and hopeful reads for autumn. What does autumn mean to you? If you read seasonally, what are you looking for in an autumnal read? Let me know in the comments. Recommend something to me as well. And hopefully, if you like this video, you'll click subscribe or like, maybe stick around, and hopefully I'll see you again here soon. Bye.